right, well, welcome to this very special TFL Talk podcast, and I've got a very special guest, Steve. Thank you for coming down. Steve is a friend of mine. He also is an extraordinary off-roader, and we're going to be talking about what you built, which is, I think, the world's most badass Defender.
I'd like to think so. So Socorro in the shop and our guys just finished this about 4 weeks ago, and we hit Uray with a Rover rally for the weekend a couple weeks ago, and then we just took it on the Rubicon Trail a little over a week ago. So
you can just look at me. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay.
I know the camera's there,
Yeah,
but don't worry
that's
about
fine.
that. Just look at me.
Yeah.
So in this episode, we're not only going to be talking about Kong and how you built it and how it went over the Rubicon Trail, but you're also a Jeep guy. So we'll do a little bit of Jeep versus Land Rover discussion. Because
Yeah.
you got a 392, I know, as your personal vehicle as well.
We've got a 392 and a couple classic CJs and a couple TJs and a 4Runner, and we have a Bronco on order. And yeah, so our company has 37 dealerships, so we are partial to many brands.
Did I say you're the manager of the Land Rover Denver store?
Yeah, so VPGM there at Land Rover Denver, so have to be PC, right? But yeah, that's kind of where this was born.
All right, so Matt, roll the open, and let's talk about the Rubicon. Welcome to TFL Talk, the official podcast of TFL Studios, where we talk about the best, and yes, even sometimes the worst new cars. We talk about the coolest and sometimes the least uncool old cars. And of course, we give you an insider's view of all things automotive. And hopefully we do it having fun and sometimes arguing. So if you're driving, keep driving. And if you're not, why not? All right, Steve. So before we talk about the Rubicon and how you went over it and how much damage you did going through it, let's talk about Kong and the build, right? So as you know, Land Rover has a stellar reputation for building off-roaders, and when the new Land Rover came around with the Defender model, a lot of people were like, hey, this thing is more of a mall crawler than an off-roader. But looking at Kong here, which if you're listening to this, you should probably go to All TFL, because we'll probably have a video about it. You'll be impressed immediately that it's rolling on 37s.
Correct.
That it's got... it's got every bit of off-road gear I've ever seen on an off-roader. So tell me about how you got to building this monster Defender.
Yeah, so this is our fifth build. We had Big Barry before that, and Big Bertha before that, and Mud Flap and Big Wheel. So it's been an evolution. This one's on 37s with a 5-inch lift from J. Austin Fabrication. And then we're running on 20-inch wheels from Wheel Pros and a 37-inch Toyo Open Country MT. And then we added a Voyager rack and then some Lucky 8 sliders, a Warren 10S Platinum winch, which I highly recommend, not because we got paid anything, because we didn't, but it's fantastic.
Yeah, they make good winches.
Yeah. And then we did some custom things. So we have full belly skids on this one. It's 3/16-inch steel plating. And then Lucky 8 fabbed up some rear control arm sliders for us, which we definitely used on the Rubicon. And then we kind of integrated the factory front skid into the subframe and connected it to our steel skid plates.
Now, unlike a Jeep, obviously, a Land Rover has independent suspension all around.
Correct.
And vehicles with independent suspension are much trickier to lift, especially if you want to roll on 37s, because you get to do things like relocate coolers, I think, right? Because I think in the side of this thing, under the headlights, there were intercoolers, right, that had to be moved.
So there's two coolers from the factory. We relocated one underneath the engine in the subframe and then removed the second one. Those coolers go to the transfer case and transmission, and more for towing really than drivability. So would impact the overall tow capacity, I'm sure. We don't have that number yet.
So tell me, how did you go about lifting it? How do you lift the independent suspension? Because look, in a Jeep, right, you've got solid axles, so that's not that hard, right? You can basically separate the body from the chassis, ladder frame, right? It's something that's been done over and over. The Jeep is actually, in some ways, meant to be lifted, but this is not meant to be lifted.
Yeah, this is a complicated surgical procedure. So it's a 5-inch subframe lift, and there's a front and rear subframe on the new Defender. So this is basically an entire assembly that you bolt into the subframe that lowers the subframe and or raises the body at the same time. Keeps the same geometry of the engine and the drive line, all the steering components, so there's no additional fatigue or stress on those because they're sitting in their factory position. All we've done is increase ground clearance with tires and increased the ability to put them under there.
But these kits don't exist. You had to make this up as you went along.
So Jay Austin is a customer of ours and a
Yeah.
friend of ours, and he's been hand building these.
Okay.
And he does them one at a time, and it's a labor of love for him for sure. And so this is our third kit we've put under one of our vehicles of his, and then we've been doing customer builds as well.
And how many hours does it take? How many hours? That's two questions. How many
Yeah.
hours are you into this Kong build, and how many hours is the lift?
Well, Socorro's into this build way more than I am.
Yeah.
So he and the guys in the shop, we're probably 2 solid weeks on this build to get it to where we
80
can put
hours.
it on the trade. Yeah,
Yeah,
easy,
easy.
probably well over 100.
Okay.
Yeah, where a Jeep, in the weekend you can put some springs under there, and
Yeah, exactly.
and so it's a quicker build.
You could do it in one day.
Yeah.
And when you set out to do this, and you said this is your 5th build now, did you set out to build the most capable off-roading Defender? Was that the goal? Because it certainly looks to me like it is the most capable.
Yeah, it's named Kong for a reason.
Yeah.
Our intent was to build, we're pushing the envelope on this chassis and this platform. We want to prove what it can do, and we went out to the Rubicon with a great group and did just that.
All right, so let's talk about the Rubicon.
Yeah.
So you were out there with how many Land Rovers?
So it was 30 plus total Rovers from the NorCal Land Rover Club. Great group, rowdy crowd, super fun. The group you go with always makes the trip. We had an absolute blast.
Yeah, so let me define the Rubicon. I've been lucky enough to do it twice with Jeep. Once I did it in a Wrangler, the JL, and once I did it in the Gladiator, which was not as happy because it's a longer wheelbase. But the Rubicon isn't long. I want to say it's maybe 13 miles or something.
It's 21 miles all the way, but the last 4 are kind of dirt roads.
Yeah, the last 4 are dirt roads with these like cantaloupe-sized rocks that
Yeah.
make for a very unpleasant
Yeah.
drive. And there are well-known obstacles along the way, starting with the gatekeeper. And it's one of those kinds of trails where you could walk it faster than you can run it. So that, I think, gives people an idea of how technically difficult it is. It's just a lot of very difficult off-camber ground, I would say off-road braking, all kinds of like funky rocks from, like I said, from the groundkeeper. Well, we'll talk about the different obstacles. But what makes it really unique, of course, is that Jeep has now named their highest level of off-roader based on it. And so, when a Jeep is trail rated, they mean it can take on the Rubicon Trail.
Correct.
So it's an adventure for sure. It's not easy. And tell me about your trip and how you decided and why you decided to do the Rubicon.
So
And it also changes, right? Because every year it changes because like they get storms and the obstacles change. They don't stay the same.
yeah, boulders move with snow and
Yeah.
ice and rain and everything else, and then you have groups come in with large groups that maybe
Move
stack
boulders. Yeah,
rocks or
yeah.
move boulders, in their favor, or maybe to make it more difficult as well. So, yeah, my understanding is it's never the same trail.
It's
year to year.
unforgiving. It's not like
Yeah,
you figure, okay, I got over the gatekeeper, I'm good, and boom, right away to the
It's
next one.
relentlessly beautiful.
Yeah.
That's how I would describe it. It's just nonstop picking a line for 21 miles, and it's really hard on equipment. you're constantly paying attention to your next line. So mentally, it's pretty demanding trail.
And about halfway through, the Jeep Jamboree guys have a camp. Did you stop at that camp?
Yeah, so we stayed the second night when we were on the trail. We stayed at Rubicon Springs. So,
okay.
Gorgeous. I mean, just a beautiful trip. So this event's called Rubicon, and the NorCal Land Rover crew they put it together, and it's limited, I think, to maybe 36 total vehicles, and we had a couple that couldn't make it due to personal reasons or COVID or whatever. But we had, I believe, 30 plus on this run, and just a super fun group. I mean, they're just diehard Land Rover guys, and it was really fun to be on the Rubicon and run into other brands. That they were excited we were out there and doing what we were doing.
Yeah. So look, if you were to ask me like what the best vehicle for the Rubicon Trail would be, it wouldn't be your vehicle just because it's too pretty and too nice and too expensive, right? I would say you get like maybe a Cherokee. Put a 6-inch lift on it, right? A $4,000 Cherokee with a 6-inch lift with that old straight six and a bashed up body, because it's going to be more bashed up by the time you get off of it, right? This is
sure.
This is a trail that punishes vehicles like no other, right?
Yeah, you're going to have some body damage for sure. So maybe that Cherokee has no glass too.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
By the end of it. So what kind of Land Rovers were on this trip?
So it was a lot of classics. So Series 1, Series 2, a bunch of Defender 90s, 110s.
Stock?
Some stock,
Yeah.
yeah. There was some stock 90s, and drove
without
right
winching?
through. There may have been some winching. I will say we never pulled cable for Kong. Kong drove through everything all on his own. We were never strapped out or pulled cable. So that's a big win.
I'm betting you stacked a lot of rocks for some of these, standard, off-the-shelf Defenders.
I don't recall us stacking rocks for anything, but I'm sure we did somewhere.
Okay, all right.
We didn't for Kong, I can tell you that.
All right, and so brave people taking their brand new Defenders. And of course, the Defender went kind of from being this very square-bodied, very basic off-roader to being a much more modern, with all the amenities. So it went from a V8 or a diesel, depending on whichever one you end up with, to I think there are 3 powertrains now you can get in the Defender?
Yeah, so this one's a V8 518 horsepower supercharged, and then there's a 6-cylinder mild hybrid
and a 4-cylinder turbo.
Yeah,
yes. So 3 powertrains. So you got the top of the line.
This is the big dog.
So
we actually ordered this car to run this back in 21 with Rubicon, and then there weren't enough parts for the United States, so they only built 40 or 50 units, and it didn't come until this year. And then we had another build, the Trophy Edition, which is Big Barry, and we would have taken that. But then there were fires last year when we were supposed to go at the Rubicon, so we couldn't go.
All right, so walk me through what it was like getting through. Let's start with the Gatekeeper.
Yeah.
So the Gatekeeper is basically this. What's a Gatekeeper? It's kind of an off-camber rock stack with trees on either side, which makes it tricky because if you get it wrong, you will roll into a tree.
Yeah. So if you'll notice on our rack, we actually had Voyager make some rack sliders, and I had some comments, hey, that's funny, and we used them half a dozen times on this trail because you articulate into the trees, and we were actually sliding on those those sliders.
Which is better than sliding on the side of the vehicle.
Yeah. So we sustained one little mark behind the right rear wheel. That was where a tree slid off of that rack, and then I went into a hole in the Gatekeeper, first 100 yards of the trail, and scuffed the lower bumper there. And then we've got one other spot on the front left.
So how do you make the rack? How do you attach the rack in such a way that it can carry the weight of the vehicle?
So that particular rack is rated for 1,000 pounds from Voyager, okay. So you can put rooftop tents on it.
Because most of them are rated barely for a rooftop tent, right?
Yeah,
they're a couple hundred pounds.
The factory rack would not have sustained that lateral
hit,
weight of the truck on there. And usually when you're tipping into a tree, it's pretty slow motion, and it's not an impact. It's a slow, dip into it. But we used those I don't know, half a dozen times we were touching trees with those.
So the thing about I've done it with a group of, like I said, Wranglers and a group of Gladiators, but you go very slowly, right? So like usually you have spotters. Did you guys have spotters?
We had them when we needed them.
Yeah.
Little sluice and some of those obstacles. Certainly going through the big rock. I can't remember the name of it.
Had you done it before? Was this your first?
I had
time?
not.
No,
I
this
had
is
not.
Your first
so
time.
yeah, we're pretty much Moab and Colorado.
So what surprised you about it?
It was beautifully torturous. I mean, that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, like here in Colorado, let's say you do a typical obstacle. There's maybe one or two typical run. There's maybe one or two obstacles. Right here, it's just one after another after another. It's not like it's like probably the most obstacles on any trail that I know of.
Yeah, you go to Moab and you've got a lot of nice. I wouldn't say it's paved, but that slick rock is pretty smooth. Where this, you're literally driving over stacked rocks the whole way.
Yeah.
I mean, it just never stops.
Yeah. And so how did the other vehicles fare? So I mean, obviously you've built out a vehicle that, if any vehicle can do it, it's Kong. But how about like a standard Defender? How did it do?
So we had no breakage, so we ran the entire trail, didn't break. I know some of the guys, we had an axle failure, a hub failure, just some little things here and there.
Did they have stock tires, or did they go after?
They're both. There was
Both?
some guys running D90s on stock tires, and then there were some guys up to, I think there was some 37s on some super built, old Series 1, Series 2 stuff that was really cool.
Like Chris had.
Giant
Our friend
Giant
Chris.
V8s. I mean, they were sweet. I mean,
Like are you thinking like Chris's yellow rig like that?
yeah, like
okay.
that, probably even more so. I mean, because they had 6-liter V8s, and one I think was
So
twin
what
turbocharged.
was the least off-road worthy one that made it through? The one that you were like, that's not going to make it, and then he or she made it.
I mean, the stock 90s were probably the least prepared as far as building. You
Yeah.
know, they were off the shelf, and they ran right through it. So
one of the things that obviously Jeep does that Land Rover doesn't necessarily do is lockers, and this is one trail that certainly rewards lockers. So obviously Land Rover pioneered and were the first to come out with the terrain management system where it sends power depending on where it's needed. But you and me both know that there's nothing like having everything locked all the time, especially on something like the Rubicon Trail. So how did the guys without lockers, or were there guys without lockers, do?
Everybody had lockers. There's one guy, Don, that always likes to point out when he's turned them on, because he likes to run a long way without them, which is super cool. I
Did
mean,
you get past the gatekeeper
that's
without them?
that's a good nod to when you've got a great setup, when you can make it through a lot of stuff without lockers. But Kong has a center locker, rear locker, and then front locking diff, like an anti-spin, which kicks in.
Like a Torsen.
It's like a viscous coupling,
Okay.
like a friction
Right,
limited slip. So it kicks in. There's a lot of technology in the new Defender. To be honest, on that trail, we turned it all off and turned traction control off, and it woke the truck up because the vehicle would think you're in a skid or you're in some kind of a panic situation, and it would cut power to the engine to protect you, as it should. And turning it all off allowed you to heat up tires and climb rocks and do what you needed to do. Most of the trails in Colorado or even Moab, we'd leave that on and we run maybe the rock crawl mode. But this was a different situation.
Yeah, I can't explain to you how difficult the Rubicon Trail is, because it's basically pointy rocks that you go up and over that seem to be diabolically designed to either get you off camber or get you stuck and high-centered or get you into a situation where the thing's about to roll. Right?
Yeah. Tie rods or they don't like this trail. We put that 3/16" skids underneath the whole truck, and we hit every square inch of them.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
I had someone reached out, said, do you think a stock Defender could run the Rubicon? And I would tell you absolutely not, because it's a ground clearance issue.
Yeah, there's just not enough.
There's not enough ground
You'll
clearance.
high-center it.
The stock D90s got hung up on some obstacles that we drove right over.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a solid axle, great drivers. It just didn't have enough clearance. and we literally just drove right over it.
Yeah. When we did it, we had the Jeep Jamboree guys, and they were helping us. So they were basically, a bunch of journalists, right? So this is not a group of people that necessarily off-roads a lot. They stacked a lot of rocks for us. They certainly guided us over, so we had spotters. But you're right, there was not one part of the Jeep's underbody that didn't at some point get. I mean, that's all you hear. It's like,
a lot of screeching of steel on rock.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of that.
And Jeep, of course, had to prove to us when we did it that a standard Rubicon can do it. So we did it in 2 days. So we did the first half and then spent the night at camp, the Jeep Jamboree camp. And then the second day, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get into the built Jeeps.
Yeah.
So it made my day a lot better.
Yeah, there's no replacement for tire diameter, certainly on that trail.
Well, plus you're air down, right? So you need that extra height because you're going to lose some and you need to be air down to get the grip to get over these obstacles.
Yeah, we ran this mostly at 15 PSI, and then I think day 2 we ran at about 12.5, 13. So.
All right, so let's talk about your other vehicle, your personal vehicle, which is a 392 that you built out. Tell me what you did to that. So you're running 37s on there,
they're
right?
never done. Well, I had 39s.
Yes.
We're moving. In fact, I just mounted last night. I'm mounting 40s. We're going to Moab next week, and then we have some 1-ton axles on the way, and so we're going to stage 3 on that one. But it's 4.5-inch lift on adjustable King shocks and 4.5-inch Evo lift.
On 40s now.
Will be 40s,
Will be 40s, yeah. You're building that into a complete.
Yeah, we're going to stage 3, and as you know, if you get to stage 3, you've lost your mind. So,
at that point, the power that Hemi puts out is needed to turn those big wheels.
Yeah.
So was there a part of you that was like, I wonder what this would do on the Rubicon? Do you want to know?
Yeah, I'd like to run it, with my kids. They've got 2 TJs and my family, and it'd be fun to go back and run it with them. Totally different experience, obviously, with my family, but the group you go with makes the trip.
Yeah,
these guys were awesome.
Yeah, tell me what was fun about it.
Just a really rowdy group that are just diehard Rover guys, and they love them, and it's their culture, and it's just a fun group, and it was great to be invited to go, and I had a blast. I mean, I'm in a lot of car clubs and groups, and absolutely, I told you before we jumped on here, but probably one of the best trips I've ever been on.
Wow. So you've got, one foot in obviously you manage a Land Rover dealership, and then you've also, part of a larger group that owns how many, 37 dealers?
Yeah, so we have 37 dealerships.
Yeah.
We've got Porsche, Audi, Lexus, Toyota, Ford, Aston,
What's the group
Bentley.
called?
It's Holman Automotive out of New Jersey.
Okay, so.
And family owned. And
Okay.
so we've got 4 locations in Denver, and then we're up in Portland, Seattle, great Western North, and we're down in San Diego. We have Porsche, Audi down there, and a Land Rover Jag store down there as well, and then East Coast, so mostly Florida and New Jersey.
So you've got 1 foot in kind of the Jeep world, 1 foot in the Defender world. What would you say is the difference between the two? I'm not going to ask you which one you like better. I think that'd be unfair. But tell me the difference between the two.
Yeah, I mean, the one's a howitzer and the other's a scalpel.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the 392 is you're bringing a tank to a knife fight.
Yeah.
It does things really well, like crawl over rocks and the top and doors come off, and I love it for that. The Defender, you can tow 8,200 pounds, seat up to 7. You can get a 518 horsepower supercharged V8. I have my favorite thing to rib the other guys on the trail when they were really hot because they don't have air conditioning was, my cooled seats are working really well over the radio, and my air conditioned or refrigerated glove box, my Gatorade's really cold. And, that was fun to rib back and forth on that. It's just more sophisticated. It's more refined. It's just a different animal.
How about the communities? How are they different?
That's an interesting question. I think they're very similar. Like the NorCal guys are very similar to a lot of the Jeep guys for sure, because they are diehard. They're out to go use their vehicles.
Yeah.
And
so are Jeep guys and gals.
They're
They're both going to use, at least the group that does use them uses them hard, right? There's a large group of people. in both communities that will never take it off road.
For sure.
Right, but the
For
ones
sure.
that use it.
I mean, 98% of Defender owners are never going to do what we did, but they know that it can do it, and that matters. It's like 918, so I ran Porsche store for 12 years, and the 918, is unobtainium for the rest of the world other than 918 people, and they like being part of that heritage and knowing that, their car can do a lot of crazy, cool stuff.
All right, so I want to get your opinions. For all you off-roaders, you may want to go grab a snack because we're going to take a hard left turn here, and I want to get Steve's opinion on this because I feel like I've been justified, but I may be wrong, so I want to get your opinion because you've been in the Porsche world. So come back in like 4 minutes because we're going back on road now. So I got to be one of the journalists that got to drive the new GT4 RS, right, which is a Cayman, the top of the line Cayman. And for a long time, Porsche kind of had the 911 as a top dog, and they kind of underpowered or maybe didn't quite give the Cayman its due. And in some ways, it's a better track car because it's mid-engine versus rear-engine, right? So I think with electrification coming and with the next 911 most likely being either a hybrid or an electric version, they let the engineers go, and so they designed what in some ways is the most track-worthy, the most the British would say weaponized, right? It's a weapon,
Sure.
Porsche out there, and they put it in my hands, and I got to drive it around Big Willow in California, following a 911 lightweight turbo. So there's a lightweight version of the Turbo S, right, where the roof is a little bit lighter, the glass is a little bit lighter, and for the most part, I could keep up with the 911 around the turns, but the 911 has more power. The turbo especially, so on the straightaway he'd get me, but in the turns I could keep up with him. And I walked away from that thinking like I was the only guy who didn't like the car. I just did not like the car.
Wow.
And the reason I didn't like it was because it used to be, once upon a time, that like manufacturers built street cars that you could put on the track. But now some switch has gone off, and they're building race cars that you can put on the road. And it's a subtle, but it's a big difference, right?
Sure.
So like with the GT4 RS, one of the things you do is you have induction, which is right next to your head. I mean, it's like right next to your head. And you've got the steering that just comes alive. So when I say I didn't like it, I loved it on the road, but I cannot see myself, I mean, I loved it on the track. I could not see myself like driving this thing as a daily driver or putting my wife or anybody I love into it because it's so race car-like, right? It's so raw. And I've heard the same thing about the new GT3 RS, right? It's as close to a race car as you can get. And I'm thinking to myself, if you're one of the lucky people who can buy one of these, then maybe you'll never actually daily it, or you'll maybe drive it to Cars and Coffee and show it off, you're right, which is probably what I would do. But as a car that you live with, race cars are freaking miserable, dude. They're just no fun.
Yeah.
Right? There's no ground clearance, right? The steering is nervous and jittery, right? The thing doesn't come into its own until you're actually on a racetrack pushing it.
Yeah, 7 grand RPM. And
Yeah, and it screams and it's loud and it's uncomfortable, right? And those
Isn't
carbon
it
fiber
glorious?
seats. What?
Isn't it glorious?
No, it's not. It's glorious on the track, but then how often do I go on the track, right?
Sure.
Right? So this trend, and there's a Lamborghini I drove like that too, the STO, same thing. It's basically a race car you can take on the road, and actually that one's even kind of more handicapped because it's so loud. I think it's 134 decibels. That most racetracks won't allow it.
Wow.
Right? Like it's just too loud. Big Willow will allow it, but like Laguna Seca won't.
Sure.
You know? So what's your feeling on that?
Well, I mean,
I know.
I think you're right. The GT cars certainly on Porsche are very raw.
But the
they're race
GTs are
cars.
still kind of road cars that you can put on the track, right? The GTs, the GT3, but the RS versions of them are so
Yeah, I think
hardcore.
that's probably deliberate.
Yeah.
I mean, they're even probably pushing those cars more and more apart. It's intentional, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
I think the greatest road car, we were talking beforehand, if I was going to order a Porsche today, I'd order a Targa 4 GTS when it's available. It kind of hits all the buttons for me. A little bit more power. Of course, the turbo's crazy fast, but it's just a different car. I like it a little bit more connected to the road, a little bit more visceral, a little bit more feedback. And the daily a GT3 RS or a GT4 RS
or even just drive it to Cars and Coffee. You're going to get a headache after the first.
It's a race car. I mean,
it's
that's
a race car,
what it's meant to be.
Yeah.
And so
and
the
it's
guys,
glorious on the track.
Most of the guys that are buying that car have a stable of cars, and they pull that one out when they can, and it's fun to go beat on a little bit and put back away, and hop in the comfy.
It's not like a Subaru.
Yeah, hop in your LX 570 or whatever else you've got in the garage that's comfortable. So.
All right.
Or your Defender.
All right.
Or your new Range Rover.
All right. Come on back, all you off-roaders. Let's go back off-road now that I've done my little Roman rant on why. And it's funny because, I don't know how well it's selling for a lot. Right now we're in a weird. Yeah, let's talk about that, actually. You're in the dealership business. You know more about this than me. What's going on with the supply chain?
So across all dealerships, we've got pinned up orders that obviously everyone would love to build every sold order tomorrow and have it delivered next week. Parts availability has been an issue. The manufacturers are doing a really good job of allocating it to certain models, to try to meet demand. So Defender, Range Rover Sport, and new Range Rover are, sold out through next year nationwide. Doesn't mean can I get a car next year? Probably, because I think you'll start to see allocation return to some normalcy next year. But right now, if we're talking about today, there's a pretty good wait. I mean, I've been waiting for my Bronco for 2.5 years, so I forgot what I even ordered.
How about
I've bought 3 cars since I ordered that thing. So.
You still haven't gotten it, huh?
Still don't have it.
How about can you get Defenders?
Defenders,
are they gettable?
They're getting better. I think we're down under 100 waiting on allocation, and San Diego Land Rover store is ours as well, and I'm not sure where he's at. He's probably got a little bit bigger list than I do, but we're top 10 full-size Range Rover and Defender dealer nationwide. So. And
speaking of Range Rover, I just went on the program and we just actually had the new Range Rover here, and it's phenomenal.
It's gorgeous.
They just nailed that thing.
It's very Gucci. It's gorgeous.
The here's my take on the Range Rover. Right, here's what I think is the magic sauce in the Range Rover. Right, when you get behind the wheel of a Range Rover. Every life just seems to be much better, right?
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
For sure.
No matter what's happening on the outside, right? There could be hurricanes, there could be snowstorms, there could be massive flooding, but everything seems right with the world.
You are flying private jet.
Yeah, it's just there's a sense of well-being that no other vehicle, I think, instills.
Yeah, it's not. So I just drove it up to Aspen a few weeks ago, and it's just. You don't get out tired. It's very,
exactly.
It's comfortable. It's quiet. It doesn't beat you up.
Yeah, there's a sense of well-being about it,
and
right?
it shouldn't, but it's like next level for sure.
Yeah, and they didn't from the outside. They didn't change it around too much. It's
an evolution.
Yeah.
Rolex Submariner looks like the last year's model, but every few years it gets way better.
And I actually took it off-road in California on the program, and I think we were rolling on 23s, which is not something, with...
Probably not real off-road.
Not something you'd want to take on the Rubicon for sure.
But it's pretty.
But it was comfortable, actually. Mm-hmm. The suspension is so compliant that you can get away with 23, which is like the exact wrong size of wheel you want, right? You probably want like a 18 or a 17-inch wheel to give you as much rubber as possible, because on 23s, what do you got? Probably maybe an inch of rubber?
Not much.
Not much. Yeah, maybe 2 inches.
It's all in air ride in the computer, and then the headrests are noise canceling headrests.
Isn't that crazy?
I think that's part of what makes you get out of the car and you're not fatigued driving a long way, because you don't have that ambient noise in the car.
Are those gettable?
Those are a huge list.
I figured,
it's even bigger than Defender. Yeah.
I figured they'd be a while out there, and they're not cheap, right? They start. I think we had the. I forgot the name of the model. It wasn't the Autobiography.
So probably SE.
So,
and there's a third row available in the long wheelbase, and then there's a 6-cylinder and an 8, and then we'll have a plug-in hybrid coming.
What's the one with like the back seat that's like out of a private jet? There's one that like the back seat.
So that would be SV.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah,
we were-
so
I was
that's
thinking
executive
SV.
seating, and you can recline the seat, and it has
Yeah.
footrests, and
Yeah.
Usually you have a driver or kids that are spoiled, in a great environment.
And it's got this really kind of crazy engineered little like laptop desktop that pops out of the thing, which is
it's so cool, and,
Yeah.
and you can do custom colors in that car, and there's a big delay on that because they hand spray them, and it's sold out.
Are those built in the UK? I know Defenders, I think, are built like in Slovakia or
Yeah, the
someplace, right?
full size is UK. So, but gorgeous car, and they plan to. This will be our largest production year ever on the new Range Rover.
And now there's of course, when there's a Range Rover, there's a new Range Rover Sport, kind of like mushrooms after rain in Colorado.
Yeah. So both these products, I think, were probably going to come a little sooner, and COVID, certainly impacted the full size, and I think it may have delayed even the Sport. But so that's coming. Range Rover Sport. Those three are our volume, models within Land Rover. We sell the most of those, and the new Sport it's really cool. So. Definitely more toward the tuned enthusiast driver than the full-size Range Rover is, but they're not substantially different in size unless you go to the long wheelbase.
So Range Rover, Land Rover, there's a program in Spain that's happening on the new Sport that I wasn't invited to. Just saying, you got a lot of love here and a lot of audience, so just think of TFL next time you do a Spanish launch of a new Range Rover Sport. Love to be there. I guess we'll just have to watch it from afar.
Asterisk.
Which one sells more? Is it the Sport? I suspect it's the Sport, right? 'Cause it's a
For
little
us,
cheaper.
we're almost dead even.
Really?
In normal times, between Defender, Sport, and full size. Yeah.
That's incredible. I would have thought that because a Range Rover is so much more expensive.
Yeah, nationally, I believe Sport nudges out the other two slightly, but the intent is for those three to be pretty equal in volume.
Now, you said something interesting. You said next year you think we'll get back to more normalcy, and I think I agree with you because I'm seeing used car pricing start to come back down. And when used car prices come down, then eventually new car prices are going to have to follow, right? Because there won't be this crazy thing where new cars are the same price as used cars.
Yeah, it's been crazy times for sure. I mean, you probably know people that have traded in a car with 30, 40,000 miles and got what they paid for it.
Yeah.
And then it's the delta to the new car, depending on who the dealer is and if they mark cars up or not. We don't. I mean,
that's great.
Fundamentally, we don't do that. But there are those that do, and at some point, all of that will stabilize. Housing's been the same way, certainly here in Denver.
Yeah, for sure. And I can't believe how quickly the housing market flipped with interest rate, right? It went from being a seller's market to being a buyer's market overnight.
Yeah, it certainly impacts it. And
so when you say you don't go adjusted market ADMs, right?
Yeah, we don't.
Is that like a corporate decision?
No, that's at our location,
yeah, okay.
and most of the Holman locations. I don't oversee those, so I can't tell you who does or doesn't. But I think most do not. We might have a special edition like the Bond edition did,
right?
Because that's a numbered car. But that would be the only thing we would ever do that on.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
How many of those were made?
I think it was 200.
Wow.
Worldwide.
Yeah. How many did you get?
We got one.
You got.
Yeah, and then we got 3 trophy editions of the previous trophy.
And they're bringing the trophy edition back.
Yeah, this one's super low production, so we're only getting one of this new model, and it's a 2-door.
So you know how at the Biltmore, right? They do this competition.
Mm-hmm.
They did it last year. Well,
yeah.
Tommy got invited.
Trek.
Yeah, Tommy got invited,
Mm-hmm.
and last year Lindsey Vaughn was there, right? And
Yeah.
she had a whole camera team following her around, and then Tommy and Jeff Glucker and Brian Dorr were. So what this is basically they put on a competition where first you got to run to your Defender, and then they have a series of different challenges, I suppose. You have to winch, or you have to park the car in a
it's not all about the car.
Right.
You have to know how to read coordinates,
or
you
navigate.
need to know product knowledge and color choices, and you might have to canoe to an island and get a clue, or run 2 miles or a mile, or so it's physically demanding as well as you got to know what you're doing.
So last year, the celebrity, and they stacked the competition. They gave Lindsey Vonn, a bunch of pretty hardcore athletes, right, to help her. And I guess I'm very proud of Tommy, so I'm gonna tell the story the Tommy way.
Yeah.
So they had a camera crew following her around, and Tommy's team completely wiped everybody. They were 50 points ahead. It was 250 points, and everybody else was less than 200 points, or something like that. And then it's funny because they didn't expect that team to win, and so their camera crew was like, "Hey, do you guys have any video that we could borrow?" Because we were following Lindsey Vonn around. So I was really proud of Tommy that he was able to do that, and they invited him back. I think next month he's going back for the next
coming
one.
up.
Yeah, and this is usually a dealer thing, right? So they usually have dealers, and the cars are actually assigned to dealers. Is that how that works?
So they have a certain number of vehicles, so you have to sign up, and then you as a result you get one of the truck vehicles that they used in the competition.
And these are the trophy ones we were talking about.
Different cars. So the trophy is a customer, similar to Trek, but it's a customer event. So if you buy the trophy, then you can go compete in the trophy
that's right.
event.
So this is Trek and that's trophy.
Yeah, and then if you win in the U.S., you get to go to the international competition. So, but our team, so Socorro is going back for Trek, and then Sam and Ryan Armstrong are going. And I don't want to say anything, but they're pretty competitive, and 2 years ago we would have been in the top 2, but we maybe stopped to help somebody.
Well, that's nice.
Cost us some points, so I told them don't be so nice this year.
All right. So is that happen at the same Biltmore? Is it the same course?
This one's not there. I believe it's up New Jersey, New York area this year. So
yeah. So Land Rover, Range Rover have a series of off-road courses, right? Where if you buy the vehicle, you can go and learn the skill set that you need.
Yeah. Similar to the Porsche Experience Center, when you go to Land Rover, you can go down and experience it. We have an advantage here in Colorado because we can just go in our backyard with customers.
Right, but if you're on the East Coast,
sure.
Yeah, there's not a lot of off-roading there that's public. Yeah.
Yep.
And so do your customers take advantage of that? Do you see people actually using that? Or
we do a little bit more so just taking folks out on a trail run. COVID slowed that down, so we've got some stuff coming up in September and October.
As a store, you do that?
Yeah. It's super fun.
And are you the guy leading it, or is there somebody else?
Yeah, I go, and then we usually bring Socorro for support staff in case we, pop a tire or something. We can get a tire change real quick. And
where do you go? What's the
the one we have coming up will probably run Red Cone.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's a great trail.
Yeah.
You saved our butts when we were at Red Cone. You gave us wheels and tires.
Yeah, we had some takeoffs, I think, from Big Bertha. So
yeah, we had to leave the truck up there. It was hilarious because I pop a wheel and a tire, and then Tommy does the same thing. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, the sidewall on that tire is not off-road friendly.
No, that was not.
Let's call it what it is. It's grossly underperforming for what it needs.
Yeah.
Not a Rubicon friendly trail rated tire.
No. So let's talk about what's next. So you just built Kong. Any other plans? You got any other?
So we've got some more plans for Kong. We are working with Tim Scully, or coming up to work with Tim Scully to see if we can't figure out how to get a front locker, air locker in that.
Like an ARB.
Yes, yeah. And then when we do that, we'll need to upgrade the axle shafts with RCV.
How strong are the Defender shafts? You said you're going to upgrade your...
We haven't had any issues. We've seen a couple of rear shocks that have failed.
Who does the shocks for them? Do you know? Are they their own?
I'm sure they sub them out to someone, but I'm
they're
not
not
sure.
like Fox or King. No, they're not like one of them.
There's not a proprietary brand on them.
Yeah.
So tie rods and steering box will become the weak point if we get the locker up front. So we'll explore trying to beef that up.
I think you're really pushing the envelope. Does Land Rover like that, or are they like, stop it?
Yeah, no, they're fans.
Yeah.
My whole intent is to show this is a super capable truck, because when it came out, there were doubters. And we certainly won some over on the Rubicon Trail, not just in our group with Rubicon, but we had an audience kind of everywhere we went. And they were excited to see it out there, and they.
Were there a lot of like Jeep people who were like, holy cow?
We had a couple guys. I had heard one guy in Little Sluice said, "Oh man, that thing's gonna flop," and we drove right up it after a classic struggle to get up. We did the hard bypass because my whole intent was to run the trail without any breakage. Next year we'll run the big boulders and Little Sluice in the middle there. But we drove right up that. It didn't even blink, and it did that all weekend long. People would walk up to watch it not do anything. It's like a car wreck, right? You want to see what happened, and then we just drive right up it, and they'd be like, "Wow."
I think the reason that there's this kind of disparity between like what you guys are doing and what corporate's doing is because of where you're doing it, right? So I know they have an off-road testing area at HQ in the UK, but in general, Europe doesn't have a lot of, I've been to Europe a bunch, and there's not a lot of hard off-roading. You have to go to like Northern Africa or someplace like that to actually, get into the kind of stuff that we have. And so for them, I think the stuff that you guys are doing is not something that is natural because it's just that geography isn't there.
Yeah, muddy dirt roads with puddles is not really
right. Yeah,
hard.
It's good on video, right? When you drive down into that muddy like pond.
I've the GM of our Lexus store at Kudu Lexus Greenwood Village. I think he drove a Caprice Classic up over Ophir Pass out of Telluride. So. You could do a lot of things in a lot of different vehicles, but this is legit stuff, and it's punishing on the vehicle.
Yeah,
and that's the difference. Is it's just absolutely punishing on the vehicle.
So I think what they did, or Land Rover did, which was very smart, was they leaned kind of into the lifestyle aspect of it, right? So
sure.
You could go and you can get the roof rack, you can get the tent, you can get the little box on the side, you can get the ladder, right? This is more, I would call it overlanding than off-roading, right? Mm-hmm. It's like the lifestyle. I want to put the canoe on the thing, right?
Yeah. It's an exceptional overlander for sure.
Yeah.
The Voyager rack, you can put a 4-man tent up there, and it's phenomenal. Our whole point is to prove it can do more, and like we said earlier, 99% are never going to do the stuff we do because they're going to look at it and go, I'm not going over that.
Yeah, and I think what manufacturers do at their peril is they sometimes, and I've seen it over and over again, and Jeep is very good at this actually. They're the ones who don't do this, right? They don't ignore the fringes, and or the
they plan for it,
right? And I think Bronco's also there.
Bronco mostly planned for it.
But
steering and tie rods are an issue, but
they don't. They understand that people do in North America take these things on very hard trails, and they take that into account when they actually not just market the vehicle, but when they design the vehicle and when they build the vehicle. Right? There was a lot of consternation among Jeep fans when the JL came up because everybody thought they were going to go to independent suspension, and in the end, I've heard internally that there was a hair's.
I think there was pretty close.
Right, yeah, it came within a hair's breadth of actually going, but at the end, the hardcore guy said, no, we want solid axles because it's easier to modify. They work. It's kind of like the difference between. It's
a tractor.
It
just works.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and it works, but it works at the detriment of on-road performance, right?
For sure.
It makes it, you get death wobbles.
Yeah, I think the 392 and the XR, they've certainly they spent a lot of time tuning that suspension, and it's way better.
Yeah,
than it was.
Agreed.
Bronco.
Plus
we have a 4Runner. They're very comparable on the trail. This is actually very comparable to those because they lift a tire. This lifts a tire. It's kind of normal if you have independent front suspension. We are not running a rear sway bar in this, which gives us a lot more articulation in the rear. So it's kind of reverse of a Jeep, where you disconnect the front and leave the rear. We're going the other way.
Yeah, so that's also
wakes it up a bunch.
You said something interesting too. Obviously, solid axles don't lift tires, right?
It's got to be
it's a teeter-totter, right?
Yeah.
If there's one up in the air, it's really you're probably at an angle where you're going to roll.
Yeah, where you're going to feel the rock or whatever on the road on a solid axle, which gives you the ride isn't as good as independent front, for sure.
So, I think that, like I said, I think that the manufacturers, and I think Land Rover leaned into kind of the overlanding, leaned into the lifestyle part of it, but that disappointed a lot of people because the previous Defender was pretty much a hardcore off-roader, right? That was Land Rover, first of all, they copied Jeep, let's face it. So they kind of copied Jeep, made it aluminum, which was unique. But then they pioneered something, which was they were the first to put luxury into that formula, into the off-road formula, and they still do that. But the old Defender, like you said, was a tractor. It wasn't, it wasn't built to be luxurious. It was built to be very off-road
Yeah,
worthy.
it was purposeful. And I think they only, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they only imported like 5,000 90s to the United States.
It was like
over
93
3 years.
over a period of a few years.
Yeah,
And those are very valuable.
So we're remembering this tiny little production number where, these are, they're building lots of these for the masses. And, we ski, we got kids on ski team, an awesome ski vehicle, super easy to clean. I mean, you guys had one. You just blow it out with the leaf blower and wipe it down with a wet towel, and there's no carpet. It's clean instantly. So that's the part I love about it.
Out of the three Defenders, right, the 90, the 110, and the 130, which one is the most popular?
110.
Okay, yeah, so 90 is a two-door, 110 is a four-door. You can get it with or without rear seats, and the 130 is the big, long Suburban of Defenders.
It gives you additional storage behind the third row seat. 130 hasn't hit the showroom yet, so we don't know what the take rate will be on that. I think it'll be more than 90, but less than 110.
And how about in terms of engine? What's the most popular engine? Is it the hybrid or is it the V8?
We're almost 50-50, 6 and 4. I mean, the 4 is really good.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of power.
300,
yeah.
Except for ours.
Yeah, well, you had that, but...
So I heard through the grapevine, so if you guys don't know, we had 3 Defenders, not because we wanted 3, but because ours kept breaking and then there were some issues with the winch. But I heard that they finally took our engine back to the UK and they tore it apart and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. And then eventually they figured out that the serpentine belt was not cut straight. So it wasn't, exactly the right length, and it was like wavy, and that caused basically it caused the engine to throw a code because it was slipping, and that's what it was. It was just all we had to do.
So it went in to protect itself, probably.
Yeah, because it messed with the timing. So if they had just changed out the serpentine belt, it was like bad production. So
hard to know.
Yeah, but it took them a lot of time to figure that out. But most of those 4-cylinder turbos are really good.
Yeah, I mean, we have that engine in a lot of product. And
it's also in a whole bunch of other vehicles. It's in the what other ones is it in?
Well, Jag uses it in several models as well, but it's in Velar, it's in F-Pace, XE. I'm not sure what else.
You don't sell Jaguar, right?
Not yet. So our San Diego store has Jaguar, and
I think you have to do both.
We have to do some showroom improvements. We're just
Jaguar.
waiting on some facility requirements from the factory, and then we'll be adding Jag.
Yeah, we just bought a Jaguar. Do you see ours? It's a 2002.
Yeah, it's a classic.
It's $6,500.
Let's go run them.
All right, so I was saying, what's next for this? So you're gonna do some more runs?
Yes. So a couple more trail runs this year, a couple customer events, and then this winter we're going to try to get the front locker figured out for the community. I mean, there's a lot of people asking for that. I will say, Ralph Sarek, he's been running his 2-door. He's on steel springs with, I believe, a 4-inch lift and 35s, and no, I don't think he even has lockers, but he wheels the crud out of that thing. And
how's the air suspension holding up?
I have had no issues. We've had one airbag failure in Uray on a unit with 60,000 miles. Some gravel got in there and rubbed a hole in it.
Now
this is a hardcore used off-road Defender 110.
Now the big sales point of the new air suspension is that they've got apparently 2 bags, right? So you've got the big bag and then there's a smaller bag, because usually what happens with air suspension is when you max it out, when you put it in its off-road mode, you then lose all suspension travel and it becomes like a goat cart because it becomes very stiff. So in the Defender, Land Rover is very proud of the fact that there's another bag, right?
It's like off-road extra.
Yeah,
Off-road
that
plus.
gives you a little bit of like.
So when you select rock crawl mode, it takes you up an additional, I think it's an inch or an inch and a half on top of that. But it rides really stiff. But you're using that to clear an obstacle, and then you bring it. So I ran most of the Rubicon in normal ride height.
Normal ride 37s, normal air quotes,
ride height. But as far as the airbags, they were in standard ride height.
Okay.
And then if we got to a really big obstacle, I would lift it up, get my tires placed on it or over it, and then we drop it back down.
You know what the ground clearance is on that on Kong normal ride height? What is it? Over 10 inches.
We'll it's probably 11 or 12 now.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, you still have. I mean, you've got control arms under there, and they're going to limit you. You look underneath a JL, the rear shocks hang way down. I mean, way down below the pumpkin. So
That's the thing that Chevy loves to do too. The mounts for the rear shocks.
Yeah, so it gives you a longer shock travel, which gives you more droop, which is what you need. It's not so much up travel; it's more down travel is what you want.
So let me ask you this: before we wrap this up, we're running out of time. When we started our off-road channel, one of the things we started to do was to review side-by-sides.
Uh-huh.
And I got to tell you, once you're in a side-by-side, it's hard to go back. Right, because I have a bad back, and the Rubicon Trail for me is murder. But side-by-sides just make that kid's play, right? Because then you're going from like maybe 8 or 10 inches of travel to like 17 or 20 inches of travel. It just becomes a whole, and then the power to weight ratio just changes. Have you done side-by-sides?
I've done side-by-sides. My hard part with side-by-sides is you need a truck to pull it, a trailer, somewhere to park. You hope your stuff's still there when you come back. And for the same money, you can buy a pretty capable off-road vehicle that you can drive around town.
Oh my gosh,
I'm not a huge fan, but I do admire their capability.
And a Can-Am or Can-Am Maverick or Polaris Turbo, those are $30,000 rigs.
Yeah.
Right, and that's before you start adding all the bells and whistles like radios and roofs and glass and all that stuff.
Yeah, no matter what you buy, you can always accessorize forever. You're never done.
So I'll tell you one story, and you might like this. I was just on a Honda program, and Honda's not going to like me telling the story, but I was going to tell it. And we were there with a bunch of automotive journalists, so we were driving some Hondas, and they decided to let us run. This was in Nashville at the race course, so they had set up like an off-road course and let us run the Talon, which is their and the Talon is actually unique because unlike most side-by-sides, it has a dual clutch transmission, so most have CVTs, right? Which is good for a side-by-side because if you overheat them, they just blow the belt. You can put another belt on them. So I was like, I don't know if these kind of automotive journalists know how to drive a side-by-side because they had some pretty tight corners. So I was like, you know what, I'll just go last. And on the very first lap, they tried to kind of put them into the corner the way you would like a car. And a car, if you put it in a corner, it'll eventually lose grip and slide. But what happens with a side-by-side is it doesn't slide. It catches and it rolls.
Right.
So, on the first lap, the guy in front of me rolled it right away. Luckily, he was fine.
Didn't put his arm out.
No, and that was another thing.
A lot of people put their arm out.
A friend of mine actually did that on his wedding day and had to get airlifted because he completely crushed his hand.
Yeah.
But luckily, they had the mesh, so you couldn't put your arm out, right? That's just a natural instinct. You want to put your arm out to stop yourself.
Even if you know not to do it,
you still do it.
It happens.
Yeah, you want to hold on to the steering wheel. And so Honda kind of gave us this come to God talk, and then we went again, and then the second lap, the guy in front of me once again, different guy this time, rolled it. They don't slide, right? That's not how they work, especially with those tires.
They hook up too much.
They hook up too much, that's what they're designed to do. But it's changing, you're out there on the trails, and I remember I used to go to Moab, and it was like guys on dirt bikes and mountain bikes, and now and then it was ATVs, and now it's all side-by-sides. Mm-hmm. And I'm out there, and I always worry about the side-by-side guys, because you'll see them out there, and these things are as close to trophy trucks as you're going to get without actually owning a trophy truck, right? They're that good off-road.
Yeah.
And I think people tend to underestimate just how quickly you can get yourself in danger. So I'll see people out there without seatbelts. I'll see people out there without helmets. I'll see little babies in the back of these things. These are it's like putting a baby in a race car. It's not a good idea.
And I wonder, as we move forward coming off COVID, a lot of people bought side-by-sides through that for something to do, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think what happened with COVID was like the first 9 months, people were like, "No, I'm going to save my money.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to hunker on home down. I'm just going to."
And then they
got
stir
bored.
crazy,
Yeah.
and they, and
then
so
they
I
went and bought
wonder
this.
how many of those summer of next year, because we've seen half on the trail this year versus last year. And I wonder, what is that going to look like in that community? I don't know. I mean, maybe they come back and they're back out again, but it's definitely gone way down.
Yeah, and then it's expensive because you need a trailer, and then you need a truck to pull the trailer, right? The beauty of Kong and of your Jeep is you just drive it out there.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you drive it home and take the top off and enjoy it in town and. Can't run your side by side. With some towns you can.
And I don't mean to trash you guys with side by sides. But there's it's always a new kids in town who are going to get I remember when.
Yeah. We call those the steel bumper guys. When the Lincoln Town Car got rid of the chrome bumper, they ruined it.
But I will say one thing about side by side. So I've run in Moab, top of the world, a few times, and you run it with like a group of people, and it's going to take you most of the day, right? Because you're just going slow, and you run it by yourself. It might take you an hour and a half, 2 hours. I ran that thing in a side by side in like 25 minutes.
Yeah, it's super capable for sure.
So and they're just different forms of off-road fun. Well, Steve, thank you very much. If people are looking to check out your dealership, where should they look?
So that's Land Rover Denver. Again, we're part of Holman Automotive, and massive company. We've got largest fleet company in the world. We have ARI, and we've got.
You got any cool used vehicles right now that are on the lot that people might be interested in?
We always do.
Yeah.
We've got Porsches and Bentleys and G-Wagons.
Do people trade these on Range Rovers and Land Rovers?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. We get pickup trucks, full-size pickup trucks,
I believe
all
it.
the time.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's these very high-end pickup trucks, right? The High Country and the Chevy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every brand has their own, the King Ranch in the Ford.
Yeah.
And it seems like people, once they want luxury, they want luxury.
Yeah, I mean, we just traded for a Laramie or limited Ram 2500 Cummins. I mean, everything under the sun.
And will you sell those, or will you like?
Oh no, we sell everything. Yeah.
You don't take them to the auction.
Yeah, we sell a lot of pickup trucks. You wouldn't think a Land Rover store would be a pickup truck store, but we are.
How about like I was just talking to Lexus. I was just driving a new RX, and they made the statement that 35% of RX owners go back and buy another RX. What's your gut feeling about Land Rover, Range Rover owners? Do most of them come back?
It's a super high percentage, super loyal brand. Yeah, definitely in Defender Sport, full size for sure. They might be more transient, like in Vogue and Discovery Sport. And then Discovery,
that's
which
another
is
one that's got that 4-cylinder, the Evoque.
Yeah,
I was thinking of that.
Yeah. Discovery falls right below Defender and even overlaps in pricing, but it has a third row as well.
And how does that sell?
Not as big a volume. That kind of tailors more to that Overlander person. When we brought Defender in, actually Discovery sales went up. Because
Really?
Defender wasn't available, and they're like, "Oh, well, that's pretty cool. It's
very similar.
got a third row seat.
Very similar.
They're similar.
Yeah.
I mean, they physically
different.
look very different, but mechanically very similar.
Yeah, there's a part of me because Discovery's, Discovery 1, Discovery 2 had all kinds of fatal flaws, and then LR3 there was a period of like 2015 to 2005 to 2008 I think, where they were completely bulletproof. And then, of course, because the LRs had really kind of hurt their reputation, they went back to Discovery 5, right? And so there's a part of me that wants to actually buy a Discovery and do something like that with it, just because it's more of the...
Yeah, they do make... So the lift is very similar for the Discovery, and Jay Austin makes it.
It would be unusual. And I remember before Defender, you were doing that too, right? You were doing a lot
Yeah,
of
so we were doing a kind of a mild stage 1 with lift rods from Lucky 8, and then about a 33.5-inch metric tire but a mud terrain, a real tire,
and for those,
and then roof racks so that you could get a tent up there.
And actually, I kind of forgot about that. And thanks for reminding me. Right, so I said that solid axle vehicles are easy to lift. Actually,
the easiest is lift rods.
Is lift rods, yeah. So they're these little plastic rods that you can replace for the factory ones that fool the truck into thinking that it's lower than it really is.
Yeah.
And so the standard height on the air suspension.
It moves your standard height.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can do up to 2 inches on those. I
like $100, right? They're not expensive.
Yeah, they're a couple $100,
yeah.
And then some labor, but you can put them on in your garage too, if you're mechanically savvy. But we kind of like the 1 inch or 1.5 inch better because it still gives you some droop, some additional.
Just one for travel.
Yeah.
So I was wrong. They're actually easy.
That's the easiest one.
Yeah, but
we're doing a lot of those on Defender. A lot of folks are going 32.5, 33.5 metric tire, way better tire, lift rods, rack. That's pretty common.
How big of a tire can you go with lift rods before it starts to rub, on the fenders or on the wheel
It
wells?
really, really depends on the tire and the wheel. So on these, that tire is more squared off on the tread to the sidewall. So not as you'd have to trim more. If you go like a DuraTrack or a KM3, which the KM3 is horrible in the snow, so I wouldn't recommend it. But
yeah, those are mud terrains.
It's a miserable tire. In fact, I just took them off my Jeep because they're awful. But
the KO3s are good, especially if there's two kinds. There's the the snowflakes, right? They're snow rated.
Right.
Those are actually good.
Yeah,
in the
they're
snow.
they're siped and they're better.
Yeah.
KO2 is a good kind of all around tire, but it's a little more squared off like that, so you might have to trim more. So it's super subjective. I'm going to beat my drum. I wish that Land Rover had planned for a larger tire in the front of that vehicle.
Yeah, I can see it.
They intentionally.
I can see the distance.
They intentionally probably didn't. Maybe in the
warranty stuff,
the redesign. I don't know. I can't answer for them, but it was clear that they had no intention of putting a big tire under that vehicle.
And it looks so good.
Yeah, it looks like it should look, right?
Yeah, it looks so good. Yeah.
Everybody comes in and they go, I want that. And then they find out that's pretty expensive to do. And we end up doing lift rods and a bigger tire, and they're super happy.
Yeah, the problem often, too, with going bigger is you can go pizza cutter, but those don't look good, right? Because you don't want that rubbing. So if you go a little narrower, then you could potentially go bigger, but then you have this tire that just looks weird.
Yeah. I think the best setup for longevity and everything's probably the 4-inch subframe lift and 35 or 34.5.
But now you're talking tens of thousands.
It's expensive, yes.
Yeah. So those are lifts that are hard.
That in the Jeeps, so it's all relative of how far do you want to go.
So do you ever do those kinds of lifts on customer vehicles if people want them?
So we'll do up to 35 in the 4-inch, yes.
Okay, all right.
And we can do up to 2 per month. And we just added 8 stalls to our shop, so we're expanding and got some more space to be able to do that.
So if you guys are out there on the West Coast or East Coast and you're looking for somebody to actually help you, come and buy a truck.
Yeah, and even
off
if
Steve.
I get calls every day, hey, here's what I'm thinking. I just want to pick your brain. I'm happy to tell you. We've tried a lot of stuff, and we're going to keep pushing it, and we'll keep trying things. And I usually talk them out of some tire choices or sizes, depending on what they want to do.
Well, thank you very much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sharing your experience and sharing your time.
Really I want to thank Don and Greg and Eric at Rubicon for getting me out there, and all the guys that were on the trail. It was a super fun trip, and it's the first new Defender that made it. So I think that attempted it or completed it, and we did it without any breakage. And huge shout out to them.
I can't explain to you guys that have not been out there on the Rubicon train just how hard that is.
Yeah. There's a lot of broken vehicles along the trail.
Oh, there are.
I mean, a lot.
Yeah.
Like every few hundred yards, there's somebody fixing something.
Yeah, like I say, it's so different from what we're used to here in Colorado or in Moab. It's just such a excruciatingly difficult course, and to be able to do it in a new Defender just speaks volumes about the Defender.
Yeah.
And your customization of it.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. See you next time.
All right.
Guys.
We'll see you. Thanks.
Remember, check out all TFL if you want to check out all of our podcasts, all of our stories. And yeah, thanks for joining me, Steve. See you next time. Ciao.
Thanks.